I'm Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, and tonight at our family dinner, my mother said those exact words again. You owe us a debt of gratitude for adopting you. But this time, I had a document in my purse that would shatter her world completely. When she saw it, her face went white as paper, and she whispered, how did you... This isn't possible. What she didn't know was that in exactly 15 minutes, I would walk out of that house, taking back the luxury BMW I'd gifted her for Christmas, while she screamed in the driveway behind me. By the end of the night, I would finally understand why my father never loved me the way he loved my siblings, and why every achievement in my life felt like paying off an invisible debt that could never be settled. The document in my purse, a bank statement, showing that my biological grandmother had been sending them $2,000 every single month for 18 years, over $400,000 total, while they told me college was too expensive and made me work part-time jobs just to buy school clothes. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was discovering that my grandmother had died 3 months ago, leaving me a $50 million inheritance and a letter explaining why she'd spent 27 years trying to find me. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been made to feel like you owe someone for simply existing. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why I'm done being grateful to people who profited from my pain. Growing up with Linda and Robert Patterson in Lakewood, Colorado, wasn't just about being adopted. It was about being reminded every single day that my existence was a burden they had graciously chosen to bear. From my earliest memories, every request was met with calculations of what I owed them in return. "Sarah, we can't afford new school clothes this year," Linda would say when I was 8 years old. "Remember, we're already spending more on you than most families spend on their biological children. Maybe if you helped more around the house without being asked, we could consider these extras." When I made honor roll in 5th grade, instead of celebration, I got an itemized breakdown. Well, this proves the tutoring money wasn't wasted. That's $200 in math help that's finally paying off. See what happens when you apply yourself? But it wasn't just about money. It was about emotional currency too. Every hug, every word of encouragement, every moment of attention came with an invisible price tag that I was expected to pay back with perfect behavior, constant gratitude, and absolute compliance. The psychological manipulation was surgical in its precision. Linda had perfected the art of making love conditional without ever saying it directly. "I hope you know how lucky you are," she'd say while braiding my hair. "Not every adopted child gets parents who care this much about their appearance." Robert was more direct, but equally damaging. "Your mother and I didn't have to take you in, Sarah. We could have had an easier life without the responsibility. I hope you remember that when you're thinking about acting up or being ungrateful." By the time I was 10, I had internalized their message completely. I genuinely believed that my worth was tied to their continued willingness to keep me, and that worth could be revoked if I failed to demonstrate sufficient appreciation for their sacrifice. The breaking point came when I was 12 and wanted to join the school science club. The club was free, but they needed parent volunteers for field trips. When I brought home the permission slip, Linda's reaction was immediate and cruel. "Science club? Sarah, we already do more volunteer work for your activities than we can handle. Between work and maintaining this household, we don't have time to chauffeur you to extra events. Maybe you should focus on being grateful for the opportunities you already have instead of constantly asking for more." But here's what I didn't know then and wouldn't discover until 15 years later. Linda had plenty of time for volunteer work. She just wasn't willing to spend it on me because she was too busy managing the secret income stream that that my existence had created. High school brought new levels of financial manipulation disguised as parental concern. When my guidance counselor called about my exceptional test scores and college potential, Linda and Robert's response wasn't pride, it was panic about how my success might disrupt their carefully constructed narrative of sacrifice. "Mrs. Rodriguez thinks Sarah should apply to competitive colleges," Linda announced at dinner one night, her tone suggesting this was somehow inappropriate. "She mentioned schools like University of Colorado Boulder, even some out-of-state options." I had to explain our financial situation. "What financial situation?" I asked, genuinely confused. Robert worked as an insurance supervisor. Linda was a part-time administrative assistant, and we lived in a nice suburban house with 2 cars and regular vacations. "The situation where we have a dependent who isn't our biological responsibility but who we've chosen to support anyway," Robert replied coldly. "College isn't a right, Sarah. It's a privilege that has to be earned. And frankly, we've already invested more in your education than most adoptive parents would." When I suggested looking into scholarships and financial aid, Linda's response revealed the true depth of their manipulation. "Scholarships aren't guaranteed, and even if you got one, there would be other costs. Books, housing, meal plans. We can't take on debt for something so uncertain when we've already sacrificed our own financial goals to raise you." The message was clear. My dreams were less important than their comfort, and I should be grateful for whatever crumbs of opportunity they were willing to provide. But I was determined not to let their limitations define my future. I started working at a local grocery store after school, saving every penny for college applications and potential expenses. When Linda discovered my savings account, her reaction was telling. "I hope you're not planning to use that money for something frivolous," she said, examining my bank statements without permission. "That money represents time you could have been spending helping around the house or studying harder. It better be going towards something that benefits this family." The idea that my own earnings from my own job should somehow benefit them was stunning, but I was too conditioned to their manipulation to recognize how twisted it was. Senior year, I secretly applied to 6 universities using fee waivers and working extra shifts to cover application costs. Mrs. Rodriguez helped me navigate the process during lunch periods, understanding instinctively that my home environment wasn't supportive of my academic ambitions. When the acceptance letters started arriving, I intercepted them at school before Linda and Robert could interfere. The letter from University of Colorado Boulder changed everything. Not only had I been accepted, but I'd been awarded a full academic scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and books. For the first time in my life, I had a path to complete independence that didn't require their financial support or emotional approval. When I finally told them about the scholarship, their reaction was everything I'd feared and more. Linda's first words weren't congratulations, they were accusations. "You went behind our backs and applied to colleges without telling us? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay our trust?" "I tried to discuss college with you," I replied. "Every time I brought it up, you told me to be realistic and consider community college." "Because we were being responsible," Linda shouted. "We were protecting you from disappointment and protecting our family from financial stress you couldn't understand." But the scholarship eliminated their financial arguments, which forced them to reveal their true objections. "It's not about money, Sarah," Robert said, his voice cold with anger. "It's about loyalty. A grateful daughter wouldn't abandon the family that raised her to chase some dream that might not work out." The word abandon was particularly cruel. I wasn't leaving to hurt them. I was trying to build a future. But in their worldview, my independence was inherently a betrayal of their investment in me. Despite their emotional blackmail and guilt trips, I left for Boulder in August 2014. The drive was silent except for Robert's occasional comments about how I was breaking your mother's heart and throwing away everything we taught you about family loyalty. College was a revelation that went far beyond academics. For the first time, I was surrounded by people whose parents supported their dreams without creating artificial debt or obligation. My roommate Jennifer's family called regularly just to check in, sent care packages, and visited for homecoming without making Jennifer feel guilty about the time and expense involved. "Your parents seem really intense," Jennifer observed after overhearing one of my weekly check-in calls with Linda, during which I was lectured about ingratitude and reminded of everything they'd sacrificed. Through Jennifer and other friends, I began to understand that my experience wasn't normal. Healthy parents didn't keep detailed accounts of everything they'd spent on their children. Loving families didn't make support conditional on constant expressions of gratitude. The University Counseling Center became my lifeline. Dr. Amanda Reeves helped me recognize patterns I'd never questioned before. "Sarah," she said during one session, "what you're describing isn't normal parenting. It's financial and emotional manipulation designed to maintain control." For the first time, I began to consider that maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe Linda and Robert had created an unhealthy dynamic that served their need for control rather than my need for love and support. My business administration courses came naturally, and I discovered a particular talent for financial analysis. By junior year, I was working as a teaching assistant and had secured a summer internship at Pinnacle Financial Services in Denver. The internship was transformative. My supervisor, Maria Santos, saw potential in me that went beyond anything Linda and Robert had ever recognized. "You have exceptional analytical abilities," she told me. "Have you considered making finance your career? With your academic record, you could go very far in this industry." When I told Linda and Robert about my career prospects, their response was predictably negative. "Finance is unstable," Linda said dismissively. "You should consider something more secure, like teaching or nursing, something with a steady paycheck and good benefits." The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted me to choose careers that would provide them with a sense of security about my future, while simultaneously ensuring I'd never earn enough to be truly independent of their influence. After graduation, I moved to Denver permanently and advanced quickly at Pinnacle Financial. By age 26, I was managing portfolios worth millions and earning a six-figure salary. But my relationship with Linda and Robert remained toxic, characterized by their constant reminders of what I owed them and their inability to acknowledge my success without taking credit for it. Then, last month, everything changed. I was having a normal Tuesday morning at work when my assistant brought me an urgent courier delivery. The envelope was thick, expensive-looking, and marked "confidential legal matter." Inside was a letter that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, we represent the estate of Eleanor Catherine Walsh, who passed away on September 15th, 2023. Through extensive genealogical research, we have determined that you are her biological granddaughter and sole beneficiary of a substantial inheritance. This matter requires immediate attention as there are legal deadlines that must be met within 30 days. Please contact our office to arrange a meeting regarding your biological family and inheritance rights. Sincerely, Michael Davidson, attorney." My hands were shaking as I called the number. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an elegant downtown law office, facing documents that would change my understanding of everything. "Ms. Mitchell," Attorney Davidson began, "your biological grandmother, Eleanor Walsh, spent over 20 years searching for you. She was quite wealthy. Her estate is valued at approximately $50 million. The number was incomprehensible. $50 million. More money than I could imagine having any practical use for." "That's something else you need to know," Davidson continued, opening a thick file. "Eleanor didn't just search for you. She actively tried to maintain contact with your adoptive family and was systematically denied all access to you." He handed me a stack of bank records that made my blood run cold. "These show monthly payments of $2,000 sent to the Patterson family account from the time you were 6 months old until you turned 18. Additionally, Eleanor sent extra money for birthdays, holidays, school expenses, and college preparation." The math was staggering. 18 years of monthly payments meant at least $432,000 in regular support, not counting additional money for special occasions and expenses. Your adoptive parents cashed every check while telling Eleanor they needed more time to consider allowing contact. They took her money for 18 years while never permitting her to see you, speak to you, or even receive a photograph. I felt physically sick. They told me college was too expensive while someone was sending money specifically for my education. According to these records, Eleanor also established a separate college trust fund that contained over $300,000 by the time you graduated high school. Your adoptive parents were informed about this fund but never told you it existed. The betrayal was complete and devastating. Not only had Linda and Robert hidden Eleanor from me, but they'd stolen educational opportunities that were rightfully mine while making me feel guilty about every dollar they spent on my basic needs. Davidson handed me a collection of letters tied with blue ribbon. Eleanor wrote to you every year on your birthday and major holidays. She never stopped hoping she'd eventually be able to give these to you directly. The first letter, dated when I was 1 year old, began, "My dearest granddaughter Sarah, today you turn 1, and I have been fighting for a year to bring you home where you belong. The family that has you refuses all contact, but I will never stop trying to be part of your life. Your mother, Margaret, would have loved you so much. She was excited about motherhood and had already chosen your name. She said you would be Sarah because it means princess, and you would always be our little princess. I love you more than words can express. Your grandmother, Eleanor." Reading letter after letter, I discovered a woman who had celebrated every milestone from afar, who had saved for my future while being denied any role in my present, who had maintained hope for over 2 decades, despite constant rejection. A letter from my 18th birthday was particularly devastating. "My dearest Sarah, today you become an adult, and my heart breaks knowing I've missed your entire childhood. I know you graduated as valedictorian and have been accepted to college with a scholarship. What you don't know is that I have a college fund waiting for you with over $300,000. I dream of being able to give this to you directly so you can pursue any education you desire without financial worry. You come from a line of strong, intelligent women. Your mother was brilliant and kind, and I see those qualities in the reports I receive about you. I will never stop hoping we'll meet someday. Your devoted grandmother, Eleanor." Armed with all the evidence, I drove to Lakewood that Saturday, carrying a folder containing bank records, legal documents, and Eleanor's letters. The Patterson house looked exactly the same, perfectly maintained and emotionally cold. Linda answered the door with her usual mixture of criticism and fake concern. "Sarah, you look thin. Are you eating properly? Living alone clearly isn't good for you." Even her greeting was manipulation designed to make me feel inadequate and dependent. I sat down and placed the folder on their coffee table. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter from an attorney representing my biological grandmother's estate. She passed away last month and left me $50 million. The change was immediate and dramatic. Linda's face went completely white, and Robert's attention snapped away from his golf tournament. "Your biological grandmother," Linda stammered. "That's impossible. You don't have any biological family." "Eleanor Catherine Walsh," I said slowly, watching their faces. "Does that name ring any bells?" The look that passed between them told me everything. They recognized the name immediately. I opened the folder and spread the bank records across their coffee table. "These show that Eleanor sent you over $400,000 during my childhood, monthly payments of $2,000, plus additional money for birthdays, school supplies, and college funds." Linda started crying, but Robert tried to maintain control. "Sarah, you don't understand the situation we were in." "I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "You took hundreds of thousands of dollars from my biological grandmother while telling me I was too expensive to educate properly. You made me feel guilty for every dollar you spent on me while cashing checks sent specifically for my benefit." I pulled out the correspondence between attorneys. Eleanor offered visitation rights, college funding, even just annual photographs. You refused everything while continuing to take her money. "We were protecting you," Linda sobbed. "That woman wanted to disrupt our family. She wanted to love her granddaughter. You prevented that because you were afraid I might prefer her unconditional affection to your guilt trips and manipulation." "There's more," I said, pulling out additional documents. Eleanor established a college trust fund specifically for me that contained over $300,000 by the time I graduated high school. Robert's face went ashen. We were going to tell you about that when you were older. Older? I stood up, unable to contain my fury. You let me work part-time jobs throughout high school to buy my own clothes, while there was a college fund with my name on it containing hundreds of thousands of dollars. We thought it would teach you the value of hard work, Linda said weakly. You thought it would keep me dependent and grateful. You wanted me to believe that college was a luxury you could barely afford so I wouldn't ask questions or have expectations beyond what you were willing to provide. I pulled out Eleanor's final letter and read it aloud. My dearest granddaughter, Sarah, if you are reading this, I have passed away without ever meeting you, which breaks my heart. Your adoptive family has prevented all contact for over 20 years while accepting substantial financial support from me. I hope this inheritance gives you the independence to live authentically, free from obligation to people who would control you through guilt. You owe no one gratitude for treating you with basic human dignity. I am so proud of the woman you've become, despite all the obstacles placed between us. Your devoted grandmother, Eleanor. 6 months ago, I said, gathering the documents, I bought you a BMW for Christmas. Do you remember what you said when I gave it to you? Linda looked confused through her tears. We said thank you. You said, "This is very generous, Sarah, but we hope you didn't go into debt for this. We wouldn't want you to make poor financial decisions just to impress us." I pulled out my phone and called the BMW dealership. "Hello, this is Sarah Mitchell. I need to arrange immediate repossession of the vehicle I purchased for my parents. The account number is—" "Sarah, please don't," Linda begged. "We made mistakes, but we did love you." "You loved controlling me. You loved the monthly payments Eleanor sent. You loved having someone grateful and dependent who never questioned your authority." Within an hour, a tow truck arrived to repossess the BMW. Linda and Robert stood in their driveway watching their Christmas gift disappear, just as Eleanor's monthly payments had stopped when I turned 18. Over the following weeks, I worked with attorney Davidson to finalize the inheritance. The main house in Cherry Hills Village was breathtaking. A mansion with mountain views, manicured gardens, and rooms filled with evidence of Eleanor's love. She had maintained a bedroom for me for over 20 years, decorated with age-appropriate items she'd hoped to share with me someday. Photo albums showed pictures she'd somehow obtained of me at various ages, school events, graduations, achievements she'd celebrated from afar. Most heartbreaking were the gifts she'd bought every year but never been able to give me. Toys for my childhood, books for my teenage years, professional clothing for my career. Each gift had a card explaining why she'd chosen it and how proud she was of my accomplishments.
"I saw this business suit and thought you'd look confident and powerful in job interviews,"
read one card.
"I know you're going to achieve amazing things."
Reading those cards, I realized Eleanor had given me something Linda and Robert never had: unconditional pride in who I was becoming, without any expectation of gratitude in return. With the inheritance finalized, I quit my job and started Mitchell Wealth Management, specializing in socially responsible investing. Eleanor's network of financial contacts helped the business grow rapidly. I also established the Eleanor Walsh Foundation, providing college scholarships and support services for adopted children and foster youth. The foundation's mission statement reflected everything I'd learned. Every young person deserves opportunities without artificial debt or manufactured obligation. Through Eleanor's genealogical research, I connected with my biological father, Thomas Anderson, and my half-siblings in California. The contrast with Linda and Robert was striking. Thomas's first words were simply, "I'm so glad to finally meet my daughter." No guilt trips about disrupting his life, no reminders of what he was sacrificing to welcome me, just genuine happiness that I existed. One detail that particularly enraged me was learning about Eleanor's private investigators. For years, Linda and Robert had complained about strangers taking pictures at my school events and suspicious people asking questions about our family. What I now understood was that these were investigators Eleanor had hired to document my life because Linda and Robert refused to provide any information about my welfare achievements, or development. Eleanor had been forced to hire professionals to watch her own granddaughter from a distance, gathering scraps of information about my life while being systematically denied any direct contact. The investigators' reports, which I found among Eleanor's papers, showed how desperately she'd tried to stay connected to my life. Subject graduated as valedictorian from Lakewood High School. She appeared confident and happy during the ceremony. Subject's adoptive parents were present, but seemed more interested in leaving quickly than celebrating her achievement. Recommend continued monitoring of college applications and future educational plans. Reading these clinical observations of my own life was surreal and heartbreaking. Eleanor had been reduced to paying strangers to tell her whether her granddaughter was healthy and happy. As I delved deeper into Eleanor's financial records, the scope of her support became even more staggering. Beyond the monthly payments and college fund, she had paid for my private health insurance for 18 years, funded a separate account for emergencies and medical expenses, purchased life insurance policies with me as beneficiary, invested money specifically for my future wedding and home purchase, set aside funds for graduate school and professional development. In total, Eleanor had spent over $800,000 on my welfare and future security, money that Linda and Robert had either hidden from me or used for their own purposes, while making me feel like a financial burden. When I confronted Linda about the health insurance payments, her justification was particularly twisted. "We thought it was better if you didn't know about extra benefits. We didn't want you to become entitled or expect special treatment." The idea that knowing about my own health coverage would make me entitled revealed the depth of their psychological manipulation. They had systematically hidden resources that were mine by right, while conditioning me to be grateful for basic necessities. Going through Linda's personal papers, which I accessed as part of settling Eleanor's estate, I discovered something that explained the precision of their emotional manipulation. Linda had kept detailed journals documenting their parenting strategy for managing me. One entry from when I was 14 was particularly chilling. "Sarah is becoming more independent and questioning our decisions about her activities and friendships. Need to reinforce gratitude messaging and remind her more frequently about adoption circumstances. Robert suggested emphasizing financial sacrifices we've made. Important to maintain her sense of obligation so she doesn't become too demanding or entitled as she gets older." Another entry from my senior year revealed their panic about my college prospects. Guidance counselor called again about Sarah's test scores and college potential, very concerned about her developing unrealistic expectations about her future. Need to redirect her toward more practical options that won't threaten family dynamics or create financial obligations we can't control. Must emphasize limitations of our situation without mentioning Eleanor's funds. Reading these entries was like discovering the instruction manual for my own psychological abuse. Every conversation, every guilt trip, every reminder of my place in the family had been calculated and deliberate. Among Eleanor's papers, I found detailed plans she'd made for my future wedding. She had researched venues, collected ideas for decorations, and even set aside $100,000 specifically for wedding expenses. "When Sarah gets married," she had written in a letter to her attorney, "I want her to have the most beautiful celebration possible. I may not be able to walk her down the aisle or help her choose her dress, but I can ensure she has the resources to make her special day perfect." The contrast with Linda and Robert's approach to my hypothetical future was stark. When I had briefly dated someone seriously in college, Linda's first comment was, "I hope you're not thinking about getting married anytime soon. Weddings are expensive, and we certainly can't afford to pay for some elaborate ceremony." Eleanor had been planning to celebrate my milestones while Linda and Robert were already calculating how to avoid financial responsibility for my happiness. One of the most disturbing discoveries was learning about my medical history. For years, Linda had told me that my birth mother had died from complications during delivery, but had never provided specific details. Eleanor's Eleanor's medical records revealed the truth. Margaret had died from an undiagnosed heart condition that could have been treated if she'd received proper prenatal care. The condition was genetic and potentially hereditary. Why didn't you ever tell me about the heart condition? I demanded during one of our final conversations. Linda's response was chilling. We didn't want you to worry unnecessarily. Besides, we couldn't afford specialized medical testing for genetic conditions. But Eleanor's records showed she had been paying for comprehensive health insurance that would have covered any genetic testing or preventive care I might have needed. Linda and Robert had hidden this coverage while claiming they couldn't afford medical expenses that were actually fully covered. I immediately scheduled genetic testing and discovered I did carry markers for the same heart condition that killed my mother. With proper monitoring and medication, it's completely manageable, but only if you know to look for it. Linda and Robert's decision to hide my medical history could have literally killed me. Going through Eleanor's house, I found a storage room filled with birthday and Christmas presents spanning 28 years. Each gift was wrapped and labeled with the year it was intended to be given. The progression was heartbreaking. Toys and books for my early years, art supplies and sports equipment for my school years, and later jewelry, professional accessories, and even a car key attached to a note for Sarah's 16th birthday. I hope this gives her independence and confidence. Eleanor had celebrated every birthday and holiday alone, buying gifts she couldn't give, imagining the conversations she couldn't have, maintaining traditions for a granddaughter she was forbidden to see. The contrast with my actual birthdays was devastating. Linda and Robert had always made birthdays feel like impositions on their time and budget.
"We don't need elaborate celebrations," Linda would say. "A simple cake and a modest gift should be enough for someone who already receives so much throughout the year." Meanwhile, Eleanor had been planning elaborate celebrations she'd never get to host, buying generous gifts she'd never get to present, dreaming of the relationship she'd been denied. Among Eleanor's papers, I found detailed research she'd conducted about colleges I might want to attend. She had visited campuses across the country, taking photos and collecting information about programs that might interest me. "I toured the University of Colorado Boulder today," she had written in a letter meant for me. "The business program is excellent and the campus is beautiful. I took pictures of the library and the student center, hoping that someday I could show them to you and help you imagine your future there." Eleanor had been planning my educational future while Linda and Robert were trying to limit my options to whatever was most convenient for them. When I finally visited Eleanor's house, I found photo albums filled with pictures of college campuses, graduate school programs, and even study abroad opportunities she'd researched for me. Each photo had notes about why she thought I'd enjoy that particular school or program. "This medical school has an excellent reputation," she'd written on a photo of Johns Hopkins. "I know Sarah is interested in helping people, and this could be perfect for her." The irony was that Eleanor had supported dreams I'd never even expressed, while Linda and Robert had tried to discourage every ambition I actually shared with them. Through Eleanor's genealogical research, I learned about an entire extended family I'd never known existed. Eleanor had documented cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who had all wanted to be part of my life. "The whole family asks about Sarah at every gathering," Eleanor had written in one letter. "Everyone wants to meet her and watch her grow up. We save a place for her at every holiday table, hoping that someday she'll be able to join us." Eleanor's sister Margaret, my great aunt, had sent birthday cards and gifts every year, not knowing whether I'd ever receive them. Cousins my age had grown up hearing about me and hoping we'd eventually meet. When I finally contacted these family members, their reactions were immediate and overwhelming. "We've been waiting 28 years to meet you," my cousin Jessica told me through tears during our first phone call. "You've been missing from every family photo, every holiday celebration, every milestone we've shared." Linda and Robert hadn't just stolen my relationship with Eleanor, they'd stolen my connection to an entire family who had loved me from afar and longed to include me in their lives. As word spread through the extended family about Eleanor's death and my inheritance, I was contacted by dozens of relatives I'd never known existed. Each one had stories about Eleanor's search for me, her hope that we'd eventually reunite, and her determination to provide for my future, even if she couldn't be part of my present.
Your grandmother never gave up, my great-uncle William told me. At every family gathering, she'd show us new pictures her investigators had taken and update us on your achievements. She was so proud of everything you accomplished, and she made sure we all knew about your successes, too. Eleanor hadn't just loved me in isolation, she'd kept my memory alive within an entire family network that had been rooting for me and celebrating my achievements for decades. My cousin Rachel, who was my age, had particularly poignant stories. Grandma Eleanor always said there should be 2 girls at our cousin sleepovers. She'd set up an extra sleeping bag and tell us stories about you, hoping that someday you'd be there to hear them yourself. Learning about these missed connections was both heartbreaking and healing. I'd grown up feeling isolated and different within the Patterson family, never quite fitting in or measuring up. Now I discovered there was an entire family where I would have been welcomed unconditionally, where my personality and interests would have been celebrated rather than criticized. With access to Eleanor's business records and financial advisors, I learned that she hadn't just been wealthy. She'd been building a business empire, specifically with my future in mind. Eleanor had started with a modest inheritance from her parents, but had grown it into a diversified portfolio of real estate investments, technology stocks, and small business partnerships. Every major financial decision had been made with consideration for how it would benefit my eventual inheritance. I'm not just preserving wealth for Sarah, she had written to her financial advisor. I'm growing it strategically so she'll have the resources to pursue any dream, start any business, or make any impact she desires. I want her to have not just financial security, but financial power. Eleanor's investment strategy had been remarkably successful. The $50 million I inherited would have been worth perhaps $20 million when she started seriously investing for my future. Her financial acumen had more than doubled the inheritance, while she simultaneously supported my upbringing. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Linda and Robert were telling me to be realistic about my career prospects and settle for modest goals, Eleanor was building an empire that would give me the freedom to pursue unlimited ambitions. Attorney Davidson also showed me records of Eleanor's multiple attempts to challenge the adoption through legal channels. She had hired some of the most expensive family law attorneys in Colorado, filing motion after motion to gain visitation rights or at least information about my welfare. Your grandmother spent over $500,000 on legal fees alone, Davidson explained. She tried every possible avenue, challenging the adoption on procedural grounds, arguing for grandparent rights, even attempting to prove that the adoption wasn't in your best interests. The legal documents revealed how thoroughly Linda and Robert had blocked Eleanor's efforts. They had hired equally expensive attorneys to fight every petition, motion, and appeal Eleanor filed. One particularly damning document was a restraining order Linda and Robert had obtained against Eleanor, claiming she was harassing them with requests for contact. The order prevented Eleanor from coming within 500 feet of our house, my school, or any location where I might be present. This restraining order was completely inappropriate, Davidson told me. Eleanor never threatened anyone or engaged in any behavior that would justify legal restriction. She simply wanted to be part of her granddaughter's life. Reading through the court files, I saw how the legal system had failed both Eleanor and me. Judges had consistently sided with the adoptive parents' desire for privacy over a grandmother's right to know her grandchild, treating Eleanor's love as an intrusion rather than a resource. The most devastating discovery came last. Hidden in Eleanor's personal safe behind a false panel, that Attorney Davidson had to show me how to open. Among her most precious papers, wrapped in silk and tied with my baby bracelet from the hospital, I found something that would change everything I thought I knew about my adoption. It was a letter from Margaret, my birth mother, written just 3 weeks before she died. But this wasn't just any letter. This was her final will and testament, written in her own hand and witnessed by 2 nurses at the hospital. Dear Mom, I know you're worried about me and the baby, but I want you to know how excited I am about becoming a mother. I've already chosen her name, Sarah Elizabeth Walsh Anderson, combining both our families, because I want her to know she belongs to all of us. If anything happens to me during delivery, please take care of my daughter. Don't let them separate you from her. This is not a request, Mom. This is my dying wish. She'll need to know where she comes from, who her people are, and how much she's loved. I've been having complications, and the doctors are concerned. If the worst happens, I need you to know that I've already spoken with a lawyer about my wishes. Sarah should stay with you, not go to strangers. I've made this legally clear in my will. I'm going to be a good mother, Mom, just like you were to me. But if I can't be there to raise her, promise me you'll fight for her. Promise me you won't let them take her away from our family. All my love, Margaret. P.S. I've written Sarah a letter to read when she's older. Please make sure she gets it someday. And Mom, if anyone tries to keep you from her, use whatever money you need to fight them. She's our family, and family doesn't give up. Reading this, I realized that my adoption had not been a simple matter of an unwed mother giving up a child she couldn't care for. Margaret had specifically wanted me to stay with Eleanor. She had legal documents prepared to ensure this would happen. Attached to Margaret's letter was indeed a sealed envelope addressed to me in my birth mother's handwriting. But there was also something else, a copy of Margaret's will, signed and witnessed, clearly stating that in the event of her death, custody of her daughter should go to her mother, Eleanor Catherine Walsh. The will had been overruled by the adoption agency and Linda and Robert's attorney, who had argued that an unmarried grandmother was not a suitable guardian for a newborn, and that a traditional 2-parent family would provide better stability. Inside the envelope addressed to me was a letter that shattered any remaining illusions about the adoption. My dearest daughter, Sarah, if you're reading this, something has happened to me and you're being raised by people who are not our family. I want you to know that this was never supposed to happen. You were planned, wanted, and loved from the moment I knew you existed. I made legal arrangements for you to stay with your grandmother Eleanor if anything happened to me. She will love you completely and give you every opportunity to become whoever you're meant to be. If you're not with her, then someone has interfered with my wishes. Your father Thomas is a good man who would have been a wonderful parent if he'd known about you. I never got the chance to tell him about you because I wanted to wait until after you were born to surprise him. I was going to call him from the hospital with the good news that he was a father. I need you to know that you come from a family of strong women who fight for what they believe in. Your great-grandmother started a business with nothing but determination. Your grandmother built it into an empire through intelligence and hard work. And I was studying to become a lawyer so I could help families stay together when the system tries to tear them apart. You have intelligence, strength, and love in your blood. Don't let anyone convince you that you're a burden or that love comes with conditions. You are worthy of unconditional love simply because you exist. I'm leaving you my mother's ring, an antique sapphire that has been passed down through 4 generations of Walsh women. Wear it and remember that you come from a line of strong women who fought for what they believed in. If you're reading this and you're not with Grandma Eleanor, then find your way back to our family, sweet Sarah. They're waiting for you. They've always been waiting for you. All my love forever. Your mother, Margaret. P.S. I've hidden something special for you in the music box on Grandma's dresser. She'll know what I mean. Attached to the letter was indeed a ring, an antique sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that had belonged to my great-grandmother. But there was also a small key attached to a chain. When I went to Eleanor's dresser and opened the music box Margaret had mentioned, I found it played You Are My Sunshine, apparently the song Margaret had sung to me when I was in her womb. Inside the music box was a small, locked compartment that opened with the key Margaret had left me. Inside that compartment was the most shocking revelation of all: photographs of Linda and Robert meeting with the adoption agency before Margaret had even given birth to me. The photos showed them receiving a thick envelope of cash in exchange for signing adoption papers. There was also a document showing that Linda and Robert had paid the adoption agency $50,000 to guarantee them a healthy newborn, with specific requirements about the birth mother's education and family background. They had essentially purchased me before I was even born, while Margaret was still planning to raise me herself. A handwritten note from the adoption agency director attached to these photos revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The Walsh family has significant financial resources and legal connections that could complicate the placement. Recommend expediting finalization before they can mount legal challenge. The Patterson family's payment ensures their cooperation in maintaining confidentiality. Eleanor had hired private investigators to uncover this evidence in her legal fight for custody, but by the time she had gathered proof of the agency's corruption and the financial transaction between Linda and Robert, the adoption had been legally finalized, and the courts were unwilling to reverse it based on procedural irregularities. Reading through all of this evidence, I finally understood the complete picture. I hadn't been abandoned by a young mother who couldn't care for me. I had been essentially sold to Linda and Robert by a corrupt adoption agency, while my biological family fought desperately to keep me. Margaret had died not knowing that her mother was fighting for me. Eleanor had spent decades not knowing that Margaret had left specific instructions for me to find my way back to the family that had never stopped wanting me. And Linda and Robert had known all along that they had taken me away from a family who loved me and wanted me back. That's why they had been so determined to prevent any contact with Eleanor. Not because they were protecting me, but because they were protecting themselves from being exposed as people who had participated in what was essentially the trafficking of a child. The final piece of evidence was a recorded phone conversation between Linda and the adoption agency director, made just 2 weeks after my birth. Eleanor's investigators had obtained this recording during their legal research. Mrs. Patterson, I need to stress the importance of maintaining complete silence about the financial arrangements. The director's voice was clear on the recording. The biological grandmother has significant resources and is mounting a legal challenge. If she discovers the payment you made or the expedited timeline, it could invalidate the entire placement. Linda's voice responded, "We understand completely. We've already told everyone that the birth mother specifically chose us and that there were no other family members involved. We'll maintain that story no matter what." Good. And remember, if anyone asks about the timing, the birth mother died before she could make any custody arrangements. As far as the record shows, you were the only option for placement. Hearing Linda's voice casually lying about Margaret's wishes and my family situation, knowing that she had rehearsed these lies while my mother was still fighting for her life in the hospital, was the most chilling moment of this entire revelation. But there was one final document in Eleanor's safe, a letter she had written to me just days before she died, apparently after learning she was terminally ill.
My darling Sarah, if you're reading this, then my time is up and you've finally learned the truth about your adoption. I'm sorry it took so long, and I'm sorry I couldn't fight harder to bring you home where you belonged. I want you to know that not a single day passed that I didn't think about you, didn't love you, didn't hope that somehow we would be reunited. Your mother, Margaret, fought for you until her last breath, and I fought for you for 28 years after that. The people who raised you participated in something terrible, but I don't want you to be consumed by anger toward them. Use this knowledge to build something better, to help other families who are being torn apart by corruption and greed. You have your mother's strength, your father's intelligence, and the determination of 4 generations of Walsh women who never gave up on anything they believed in. Now it's your turn to decide what you'll fight for. I'm leaving you more than money, sweetheart. I'm leaving you the truth and the power that comes with it. Use both wisely. The family you never got to know has been waiting 28 years to welcome you home. They're good people who will love you the way you should have been loved all along, without conditions, without debt, without keeping score. And remember, you don't owe anyone gratitude for stealing you from the family that wanted you. You don't owe anyone appreciation for participating in corruption. You owe them nothing. You are a Walsh, and Walshes don't back down from a fight. I love you more than words can express, and I'm so proud of the woman you've become despite everything they put you through. Your devoted grandmother, Eleanor. P.S. The evidence I've gathered about the adoption agency is in the locked filing cabinet in my study. Use it to make sure this never happens to another child.
Following Eleanor's final instructions, I found the locked filing cabinet in her study. Inside was a complete dossier on the adoption agency that had facilitated my placement, Sunrise Family Services. The evidence Eleanor had compiled was staggering and showed a pattern of corruption that had affected dozens of families. The agency had been systematically targeting young, unmarried mothers from wealthy families, pressuring them to give up their children while simultaneously selling those children to affluent couples who were willing to pay premium prices for healthy newborns with good genetics. Eleanor's investigators had documented at least 30 cases where biological grandparents or other relatives had been denied custody despite having legal rights and financial resources to care for the children. In every case, the children had been placed with families who had made substantial payments to the agency. The most damning evidence was an internal agency memo that laid out their business model. Wealthy biological families represent a threat to profitable placements. Their resources allow them to mount legal challenges that can delay or prevent finalization. Our goal should be to expedite placements with paying families while minimizing contact with biological relatives who might complicate the process. Another document showed that the agency director had received a $200,000 bonus the year I was placed, specifically for exceeding placement targets while maintaining client satisfaction. Reading through these files, I realized that my case wasn't unique. It was part of a systematic corruption scheme that had torn apart dozens of families for profit. Armed with this complete picture of the truth, I returned to Linda and Robert's house one final time. This wasn't going to be a conversation about hidden money or college funds. This was going to be a confrontation about their participation in child trafficking. I walked into their living room and placed a thick folder on their coffee table. This one containing everything. The bank records, Eleanor's letters, Margaret's will, the adoption agency corruption evidence, the recorded phone conversation, and photographs of them receiving money for my placement. I know everything, I said simply, watching their faces as they recognized some of the documents. Linda immediately started crying, but this time it wasn't manipulation. It was panic. Robert tried to maintain his composure,
but I could see his hands shaking as he flipped through the evidence. "Sarah, you have to understand," Linda began, but I cut her off. "I understand perfectly. You paid $50,000 to buy me from a corrupt adoption agency while my mother was dying in the hospital. You participated in a scheme that deliberately separated me from a family that wanted me and had legal rights to me." Robert attempted damage control.
"We didn't know about your grandmother's legal challenge. The agency told us you had no other family."
I played the recorded phone conversation on my phone. Their own voices filled the room, Linda promising to lie about Margaret's wishes, the agency director coaching them on how to hide the financial arrangement, their casual discussion of maintaining the deception. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said when the recording ended. "You knew my mother had family who wanted me. You knew you were stealing me from people who loved me." The confrontation that followed was unlike anything I had experienced before. 28 years of suppressed anger, hurt, and betrayal came pouring out as I detailed every way they had manipulated and controlled me while profiting from my existence.
"You didn't save me from foster care,"
I said, my voice rising. Linda collapsed completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Robert tried one last manipulation. "We did love you, Sarah. Whatever mistakes we made in the beginning, we came to love you as our own daughter." "Your version of love was ownership," I replied. "You loved controlling me. You loved having someone who felt indebted to you. You loved the monthly payments Eleanor sent while she was forbidden from seeing her own granddaughter." I stood up and gathered the documents. "But here's what you're going to understand now. I'm not your grateful adopted daughter anymore. I'm not someone who owes you anything for basic care. I'm Eleanor Walsh's granddaughter, Margaret Walsh's daughter, and I'm exactly who they raised me to be, even from a distance." "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation. Your admissions about knowing the truth, your participation in the corruption, your lies about my mother's wishes, it's all documented now." Robert's face went white. "What are you planning to do with that recording?" "I'm going to use it the same way Eleanor would have, to make sure this never happens to another child. The FBI is already investigating Sunrise Family Services based on the evidence Eleanor compiled. Your recorded admissions will be very helpful to their case." Linda looked up through her tears. "You're going to have us arrested?" "I'm going to let justice take its course. Eleanor gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire corruption network. The only question is whether you cooperate with the investigation or fight it and make things worse for yourselves." I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final statement. "For 28 years, you made me believe I owed you gratitude for my existence. Now you're going to learn what it feels like to owe someone else for your freedom." As I left their house for the last time, I could hear Linda's wailing behind me, but instead of the screaming tantrum I had imagined, it was the sound of people finally facing the consequences of their choices. The BMW repossession had been symbolic. This was justice. Within 2 weeks of my confrontation with Linda and Robert, the FBI raid on Sunrise Family Services made national news. Eleanor's evidence, combined with my recorded conversation with Linda and Robert, provided prosecutors with everything they needed to bring federal charges against the agency and everyone involved in their corruption scheme. The investigation revealed that over a 15-year period, Sunrise Family Services had illegally separated more than 50 children from biological relatives who had legal rights to custody, generating over $3 million in illegal payments from adoptive families. Linda and Robert were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, child trafficking, and violation of federal adoption laws. The recorded conversation where they admitted to knowing about the corruption became a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case. But the most satisfying moment came when the FBI agents showed me a list of other families who had been victimized by the same scheme. Using Eleanor's evidence and the agency's records, they were able to reunite 7 other adopted adults with biological relatives
who had been searching for them for decades. Your grandmother's investigation has given us the tools to reunite families and prevent this from happening to other children, the lead FBI agent told me. She would be proud of what her work has accomplished. 8 months after the FBI investigation began, Linda and Robert stood before a federal judge for sentencing. The courtroom was packed with other victims of the Sunrise Family Services scheme. Adoptees who had been separated from loving families, biological relatives who had spent decades searching for stolen children, and adoptive families who had unknowingly participated in the corruption. Linda received 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud. Robert received 4 years due to his more active role in maintaining the deception and hiding evidence. But beyond the prison sentences, they were ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to victims of the scheme. The judge's words during sentencing were particularly powerful. This case represents a fundamental violation of the sacred trust that adoption is meant to represent. You didn't rescue a child from hardship, you purchased a child from a loving family and then manipulated that child for nearly 3 decades to believe she owed you gratitude for your crimes. I chose not to attend the sentencing. By that point, Linda and Robert had become irrelevant to my life. My focus was on building something positive from the wreckage they had created. Meanwhile, my relationship with my biological father, Thomas Anderson, continued to develop in ways that showed me what healthy family love actually looked like. When I called him to share the news about Linda and Robert's sentencing, his response was characteristic of the unconditional support I had never experienced before. "I'm proud of you for seeking justice," he said simply, "not just for yourself, but for all the other families who were hurt by this system. Your mother would be so proud of your strength and integrity." Thomas's family, my half-siblings Jessica and Michael, welcomed me into their lives with an enthusiasm that still amazed me. There were no guilt trips about disrupting their family dynamic, no calculations about what my presence would cost them, no reminders of what they were sacrificing to include me. "We've always felt like someone was missing from our family," Michael told me during one of our video calls. "Now everything feels complete." Thomas's family celebrated my existence rather than treating it as a burden they had generously chosen to bear. Through Eleanor's genealogical research and the extended family I had finally met, I learned about the remarkable legacy I had inherited. The Walsh family had built their wealth through 4 generations of women who refused to accept limitations others tried to place on them. My great-great-grandmother had started a small textile business in the 1890s when women weren't supposed to own businesses. My great-grandmother had expanded it into a regional manufacturing company during the Depression. Eleanor had transformed it into a diversified investment portfolio that generated wealth across multiple industries. "The Walsh women don't back down from fights that matter," my great-aunt Catherine told me during one of our family gatherings. "Eleanor spent 28 years fighting for you, and now it's your turn to fight for something that matters." That legacy became the inspiration for how I chose to use Eleanor's inheritance. Rather than simply enjoying the financial freedom it provided, I felt a responsibility to honor the fighting spirit that had been passed down through generations of strong women. The Eleanor Margaret Walsh Foundation grew beyond my initial vision of providing college scholarships. Within 2 years, it had become a comprehensive organization addressing systemic problems in the adoption industry. Legal Advocacy Division, providing free legal services to biological relatives fighting for custody or visitation rights, and to adoptive families who discovered they had unknowingly participated in corrupt practices. Investigation Services, helping adopted adults locate biological families and uncover hidden information about their adoptions, using the same techniques Eleanor's investigators had pioneered. Legislative Reform, lobbying for laws requiring greater transparency in adoption processes, mandatory disclosure of biological family information, and stronger penalties for adoption fraud. Support Services, providing therapy and counseling for families dealing with adoption trauma, whether they were adoptees, biological relatives, or adoptive families. Emergency Fund, offering financial assistance to biological relatives seeking to regain custody of children who had been placed through fraudulent means. The Foundation's first major legislative victory came when Colorado passed the Eleanor Walsh Act, requiring all adoption agencies to maintain detailed records of biological family contacts and mandating annual welfare checks by independent advocates rather than agency employees. The documentary Hidden Families premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to win several awards for its exploration of adoption industry corruption. My story anchored the film, but it also featured 12 other families who had been victimized by similar schemes. The film's impact was immediate and far-reaching.
Adoption agencies across the country were forced to open their records for review. Dozens of biological relatives who had been denied contact with adopted children were able to reunite with their families.
Most importantly, the documentary sparked a national conversation about the need for adoption reform and greater protection for biological family rights. Sarah's courage in speaking publicly about her experience has given other victims permission to tell their stories, the film's director explained during interviews. Sometimes one person's truth can illuminate an entire system of corruption. Mitchell Wealth Management had grown into one of Denver's most successful investment firms, specializing in ethical investing and family wealth preservation. My unique perspective, understanding both the power of money and the damage it could cause when used manipulatively, attracted clients who wanted their wealth managed by someone who understood its emotional impact. Many of my clients were people who had experienced financial trauma similar to mine. Adults who had been financially exploited by relatives, families dealing with inheritance disputes, or individuals trying to break cycles of financial manipulation. You understand that money is never just about money, one client told me. It's about power, control, love, and family dynamics. Other financial advisors see numbers, you see the human story behind the numbers. The business success allowed me to provide significant funding for the foundation while also building long-term financial security that would ensure the Walsh family legacy could continue supporting important causes for generations to come. One unexpected benefit of learning my complete medical history was contributing to research about the genetic heart condition that had killed my mother. Using Eleanor's inheritance, I funded a research study at the University of Colorado Medical Center focusing on early detection and prevention of the condition in young women. The research led to the development of a new screening protocol that could identify the condition before it became life-threatening. The Margaret Walsh protocol was now being used in hospitals across the country, potentially saving thousands of lives. Your mother's death wasn't in vain, the lead researcher told me when the protocol was officially published. The research you funded will prevent other families from experiencing the loss your family endured. 2 years after discovering my inheritance, I met David Chen, an environmental lawyer who shared my passion for using wealth and privilege to address systemic problems. Our relationship developed naturally, without the complicated dynamics that had characterized my previous relationships when I was still struggling with feelings of unworthiness. David knew my complete story from the beginning, including the inheritance, the foundation, and my complicated family history. His response was characteristic of the healthy relationships I had learned to build. I'm proud of how you've used your experiences to help other people. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. When we decided to get married, I used the $100,000 Eleanor had set aside for my wedding expenses. But more than the money, I used her detailed planning notes about venues, flowers, and celebrations. It felt like she was finally able to participate in one of my major life events. The wedding guest list reflected my transformed understanding of family. Thomas walked me down the aisle, representing the biological family connection I had finally found. My half-siblings, Jessica and Michael, served as my attendants. The extended Walsh family filled half the venue with relatives who had been waiting decades to celebrate a major milestone in my life. Linda and Robert were not invited. By the time of my wedding, they were serving their federal prison sentences. Even if they had been free, they no longer had any place in my life or my understanding of what family meant. 5 years after my story first became public,
The impact continued to spread in ways I never could have anticipated. The Eleanor Walsh Foundation had helped reunite over 200 families and had successfully lobbied for adoption reform legislation in 12 states. More importantly, a new generation of adoption agencies had emerged that prioritized transparency and family preservation over profit. These agencies actively worked to maintain connections between adopted children and biological relatives when appropriate, and they provided ongoing support services rather than simply facilitating placements. The adoption industry has fundamentally changed because of the standards your foundation has established, one ethical agency director told me. We now see our role as serving children's long-term needs rather than simply satisfying adult desires for babies. Perhaps the most significant measure of my healing was that I had stopped measuring my worth by other people's approval or disapproval. The scared little girl who had grown up believing she owed everyone for simply existing had become a woman who knew her value was inherent and unconditional. When former classmates or colleagues expressed amazement at my transformation from struggling adoptee to multimillionaire philanthropist, I realized they were missing the point entirely. The money had changed my circumstances, but the real transformation was learning that I had always been worthy of love and respect. You didn't become valuable when you inherited money, Dr. Amanda Reeves observed during one of our final therapy sessions. You became aware of the value you had always possessed. That awareness allowed me to build authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than artificial obligation. It allowed me to pursue work that felt meaningful rather than simply trying to prove my worth. Most importantly, it allowed me to love and be loved freely, without the constant anxiety about earning or deserving affection. When David and I welcomed our daughter Eleanor Margaret Chen 3 years after our wedding, I felt the full circle completion of healing that had been decades in the making. Holding my daughter for the first time, I understood viscerally what unconditional love felt like. Love that had no strings attached, no debt created, no gratitude required. "She's beautiful," David whispered as we looked at our newborn daughter in the hospital. "She looks like she has your determination already." Looking at Eleanor Margaret, I made a silent promise that she would grow up knowing she was worthy of love simply because she existed. She would never be made to feel like a burden or told she owed anyone gratitude for meeting her basic needs. She would understand that real family celebrates achievements without taking credit and supports dreams without limitations. Most importantly, she would grow up knowing the complete truth about her family history, both the pain and the triumph, the separation and the reunion, the corruption and the justice that had shaped her legacy. Looking back on the journey from that first letter from Attorney Davidson to where I am today, I'm struck by how completely my understanding of myself, my worth, and my place in the world has been transformed. The $50 million inheritance was life-changing in practical terms, providing security and opportunities I never could have imagined. But Eleanor's real gift was much more valuable than money. She gave me proof that I had been loved unconditionally by someone who never even got to meet me. Her letters, her planning, her decades-long search, and her refusal to give up hope all provided evidence that I was worthy of love simply for existing. Linda and Robert had spent 28 years convincing me that love was earned through gratitude and good behavior. Eleanor's legacy taught me that real love is given freely, celebrates achievements without taking credit, and supports dreams without artificial limitations. Today, I measure success not by how grateful other people think I should be, but by how authentically I can live and how genuinely I can support others without creating artificial obligations or debt. The scared little girl who grew up believing she owed everyone for simply existing has become a woman who knows her worth is inherent and unconditional. The adoptee who spent decades trying to earn her place in the Patterson family has become the heir to Eleanor's legacy of unconditional love and unlimited support. And, perhaps most importantly, the person who once accepted conditional love as normal has become someone who demands and provides the kind of authentic relationships where love flows freely in both directions, without scorekeeping or strings attached. That transformation from conditional existence to unconditional worth is Eleanor's greatest gift and the most valuable inheritance she could have possibly left me. If my story resonates with you, if you've been made to feel like you owe someone for basic human dignity, or if you've been told your dreams are too big for your circumstances, I want you to know this: your worth is not conditional on anyone else's approval. You deserve love that doesn't come with invisible price tags. You deserve support that doesn't create artificial debt. You deserve relationships where your achievements are celebrated rather than credited to someone else's sacrifice. Real family doesn't keep score of what you owe them. Real love doesn't require constant payment or proof of worthiness. Real support doesn't come with conditions that serve the supporter more than the person being supported. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept conditional love as sufficient. Sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away from people who can't love you without trying to control you through guilt and manufactured obligation. And sometimes, like in my case, the family that will love you unconditionally is out there waiting to be discovered, even if it takes 28 years to find them. Your value as a person isn't determined by what others think you owe them, but by the simple fact that you exist and deserve to be loved completely without conditions, artificial debt, or manufactured obligation. Have you ever discovered that someone was hiding important information about your family or your past? Have you had to break free from relationships built on guilt, obligation, and conditional acceptance? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about how you found the courage to reclaim your worth and demand the respect you deserve. If this story gave you courage to examine the relationships in your own life and question whether the love you're receiving is genuinely unconditional, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your authentic worth and reclaiming your power from people who would diminish you. Remember, you never owe anyone endless gratitude for treating you with basic human dignity. Real love doesn't require constant payment or proof of worthiness. You are enough exactly as you are, and you deserve to be loved unconditionally for who you are, rather than what you can provide in return. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth is inherent, not earned. No one can take that away from you, no matter how hard they try to convince you otherwise. If you found strength in my journey from conditional existence to unconditional self-worth, please share this video with someone who needs to hear that their value isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. Subscribe for more stories about breaking free from toxic family dynamics and building the authentic life you deserve. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of love simply because you exist. No conditions, no debt, no artificial obligations, just pure, unconditional worth that no one can take away from you, no matter what they've convinced you to believe about yourself. Your story matters, your worth is real, and you deserve so much better than settling for conditional love from people who should love you freely.